Welcome back to another episode of Lost in the Farmer's Market Garden Shorts. We're doing something a little bit different because it is the holidays, and I figured I'd stick in some special episodes and content that wouldn't normally be covered in the normal episodes. We spend a lot of time out in the lab, and I thought, let's do something unique. Something that nobody does. Like literally, nobody ever thought to do this. A lot of garden channels are all about the soil and wandering around the yard and showing people doing stuff. But they don't think about Christmas and all those assorted holidays and gift giving. So before you, I have the subject of today's miniature episode. Now, in case you're wondering where I'm filming this, I'm in my living room. I figured I might as well show you the le domicile. But anyway, this plant in front of you is called, commonly, Sausage Spurge. I know. I don't know where they come up with these common names. It looks nothing like a sausage. But, it's the cylindrical stems, I guess. As you can see, mine is exceptionally healthy. It looks more like living seaweed than anything else. Now, this particular plant is in the Euphorbia family. The scientific name is Euphorbia guentheri. I wasn't able to figure out where guentheri came from, but I'm presuming it's probably the name of the person who first categorized it, or in Linnaean tradition, the name of someone associated with or a friend of. Now, its synonym, because sometimes these plants have alternate scientific names, is Monodenium guentheri. Same last name, but Monodenium puts it closer to the Monodeniums, aka the desert rose, which is what's called a caduciform. Now, caduciforms are plants that have fat stems that store moisture in the stems. A big famous example would be something like a baobab from Africa. There are many other examples, but this is getting off topic. Now, occasionally plants' names do change, their scientific names certainly do, as genetic testing reveals things and scientists debate and argue and go, nah, I think it's this, nah, I think it's that, here's my proof. Anyway, this plant is originally from Africa, specifically in the region of Kenya. It is hardy in USDA zones 8B through 10B, and in those zones it's considered a full-on perennial, but it's a house plant otherwise. Now, 8B is one fraction of a zone warmer than us here in Fayetteville. We're zone 8A. So theoretically, for a mild winter, it'd be just fine outside, but considering that how hard it is to get these plants, this specimen came into my hands by fluke, and it's been growing ever since, so I'm not even going to risk it. I couldn't find any information on the soil pH it prefers, but from what I can tell, regular old potting soil with an eye for either not overwatering or added sand seems to work just fine. This plant has been a potted plant out in the greenhouse for several years now, and for a while it inhabited my kitchen next to the sink, but it's too big for that now. Plus the compost container's there now, and yay for no bad smells. Its exposure, its sunlight at first, seems to be partial to nearly full sun, but I don't think it would be too fond of our typical southeastern laser sun. So I'm imagining protection in the afternoon from the hottest, driest part of the day. The stems individually can be up to 3 feet long, with a width of similar length, and as you can see, what happens is the stems whirl and twirl, and they produce these leaves, and I'm going to zoom in on these for a moment, because they're worthy of note. It's a biological adaptation. Yes, fear the lava lamp. But anyway, look at these leaves. These leaves are actually succulent. They're fleshy. They are leaves, but they're adapted leaves for the specific climate this plant will grow in. Now, I imagine this thing has this vining habit to scramble on top of other plants to get to light. Most of the leaves on the lower, oldest portions of this plant have been shed already. But it's got this weird... I'm going to zoom in on the base here. I don't know if you can see that clearly, but you see those sort of projections coming out all over the place? Kind of like crown of thorns. Well, they're not actually thorny. They're just little... Some of you are going to giggle. They're like little weird nipples. I mean, there's no other way to describe them. And what they do is they grow out to the leaf where the leaf attaches, the petiole, and that's the morphology of the plant. Personally, I think it's kind of neat. Now this does flower, and they're little tiny pinkish yellow flowers that are barely of note. They're actually bract flowers. Bract flowers being flowers that have certain colors and or shapes that actually guide pollinators towards the actual flowers, which are far more inconspicuous. Now, what's interesting about this is that the latex sap, as is seen in most of the Euphorbia family, can cause dermatitis. It is also not safe to eat. It is not safe to ingest. It may cause problems with your pets. Now, I should point out, this plant and a few of the others that I'm going to be doing for this special are what's called petro plants. The latex sap in these plants can be used to generate fuel. Now, there hasn't been much research in this because, you know, in America, the corn lobby thinks corn is everything. Oh boy. You know what? No, we're not getting into that, because I could make an entire show about how bad the corn lobby is. But in other countries, they've actually studied cousins of this plant, and we will be covering those soon, and why they should be used as petroplants for producing biofuel. Now, here's some care information for you guys. This plant prefers soil on the dry side, which I already said. Potting soil with a bit extra, about 10% more sand thrown in there, or water only when dry, and you're going to have to touch test. Now, I benign neglect this plant and look at how happy it is. It gets fertilizer whenever I get around to it, but most sources recommend that you give it half-strength fertilizer, and I'm going to say to you now, do that only during the warm season when it can actively grow and you're not stressing the plant. Right now, November, when this is being filmed, would be a bad time to start fertilizing. You would start in May and then stop around September. Maybe once a month, tops. I mean, it depends on how aggressive you want this thing to grow. By the way, yes, my nickname for this plant is seaweed cactus. But anyway, I will say this, much like most euphorbias, it does not like constantly wet soil because that causes root rot. Basically, bacterial organisms that are naturally in the soil go, buffet, and they move in and they basically destroy cell structure and cause the plant to collapse into a mushy pile. Now, sometimes you can rescue the plant by snapping off individual twigs and putting them in the powdered cutting hormone. You can do that sometimes, and that's mostly talcum powder, which dries out the wound, and then the plant rooting hormones in there do the do. Sometimes the bacterium have spread far enough through the plant that there are no retrievable cuttings. But anyway, that's basically care and concern for this particular plant, this weird succulent. It is not a cacti, it is a succulent. The next episode, we're going to cover another much more interesting, or I shouldn't say much more interesting, another interesting euphorbia. We're going to do a couple of these, because poinsettias are boring. Why not give somebody who's garden-oriented something crazy like this? By the time we're done, you're going to have some crazy ideas. So, as always, folks, that's all we got for today. So keep them growing and stay tuned for the next special episode.